Welcome to those of you who are joining. We're just going to wait, give a little bit of a leeway before starting, just to make sure everyone's in and out of the lobby. If you could ensure all of your mics and videos are muted, that would be brilliant. And we'll get started in about a minute. Bear with, just checking everyone is in. Shall we get started then? Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the Money Festival. We appreciate you taking your time to expand your knowledge and become more educated on money. We hope you will leave today feeling more empowered about your choices involving money and that you'll have a better relationship with money. Please make sure to follow us on Instagram and Facebook at Festival 2020 for more updates following the next webinars and the upcoming competition we have. The terms and conditions of the event call will be posted in this chat. However, if you are a guest attending from outside of the university, you may not be able to see the chat. However, we did send the terms and conditions of the call in the email with the invitation. This call will be recorded. Please ensure your mics are muted during the presentation. There will also be an allowance for a Q&A at the end of the call. Please save your questions until the end, and we will get you to engage with Professor Allen directly by raising your virtual hand, which can be found on Teams. Professor Allen is also keen to respond to your questions if we don't have time to address them during the call, and we'll help facilitate this if you can send them through via email. We'll also be in contact at the end of the event with an event feedback form. Now, on to our first astute guest speaker, discussing the history of money, wealth creation, and more, is Professor Alan Barrell, a doctor in business administration and an expert in education, having taught in universities all over the world, including China.
Thank you so much for that very kind introduction. And let me say at the outset, it's a very great pleasure and indeed a privilege for me. It's an honor to be the first speaker at this very special event. And I'd like to thank the organizers of Money Festival and congratulate them on this very, very wonderful initiative. And I think we should all be very thankful for them too. So we've got the opportunity today to have some thoughts on money. You may already have lots of thoughts on money. I bet you do, because I do too. But let's think openly. Let's open our minds and have some new thoughts about wealth, value, people, business, banking, creativity. Let's put money in a different perspective than we usually do, because after all, it is such an important issue in our lives. So, we often hear it said, don't we, that money makes the world go round, and people will also be heard to say the love of money is the root of all evil. And as you work your way through not just my talk, but the whole of this event, I'd like you to think about those statements, and I wonder whether you agree with them. We've got this chance today to have a look at some different angles on money, some falsehoods we can dispel, some facts we can confirm. We can have some deep thinking, and we will examine the history of money. We'll look at human factors in particular, creativity, imagination, and a little bit at art and money, but that will come a lot later in the program. Don't forget, it's very common to value people. and companies and nations in financial terms. And assessments are made of success and failure, aren't they? Very often based on financial measures. Now, I haven't got a lecture for you today. I've got some sharing to do, a bit of storytelling. And I want you to be open-minded, and I'd like you to make whatever inputs you think you can make in one way or another, either online or in correspondence. So what is money? Well, the dictionary says money is an item or verifiable record that is generally accepted as payment for goods and services and repayment of debts, such as taxes, in a particular country or socio-economic context. That's a textbook definition. But what other thoughts and words do you associate with money? What do you think about money? What fantasies do you have about money? What does money mean to you? Does it mean cash? Does it mean credit, savings, security, debt, value, currency, status and importance, yearning and envy for stuff you don't have? And what about wealth? Now, the dictionary tells us that wealth is a plentiful supply of a particular desirable thing. Think of health and wealth and relative values of health, wellness, sickness, malnourishment. Wealth is so much more than money. To me it is, and I hope it is to you. And then consider the value of art, of nature, natural beauty, happiness, fulfillment. What can be bought and sold, and what cannot? What can't money buy? Now, money, we know, is also subject to criminality. We're not going to talk about that today. We have to be aware of it, but we don't have time. Many people have these mental images of money, but if you think about it, in growing numbers of places in the world, payments are not made at all with physical money anymore, are they? We'll talk about that in some depth. And we will look at the history of money, where it came from, how it evolved, why it was needed, how it's changed. But I do want to create a context for us before we do that. Look at all these other words. These words we consider daily. What do they mean to you? I'm not going to read them all out, but needs and wants. There's a big difference between needs and wants, isn't there? And between greed and plenty, and wealth and health, owning, sharing, exchanging, disposing, accumulating. These are words that we associate with money because the language of money is pervasive, and it very much influences how we value much in life. So let's start with a bit of human context before we get to the history. Prosperity and poverty, the human condition. Some contrasting images of wealth and poverty. Now, many Chinese people live in cities like Shanghai, and people around the world now live in wonderful urban areas where everything is on our doorstep. And we shouldn't forget that China has lifted 800 million people from poverty to a better life in 4 decades through wealth creation and distribution. But at the same time, in Bangladesh, Rohingya refugees from Burma are living in camps like this today. We can't overlook these realities. Human values cannot all be measured in monetary terms. And perhaps this picture helps us distinguish between wants and needs. It's hard for me to imagine what people in other parts of the world might be thinking about money and prosperity today. There are 15 million malnourished children in sub-Saharan Africa alone today, at least. And these are just reminders that thoughts and discussions about money, wealth, and value are greatly influenced depending on where we find ourselves in the world. And from one extreme to another, think about other people describe and think of value. There is the Rolls Royce. What about needs, wants, priorities? Where do thoughts of money fit in? Status, ego, lifestyle, life expectations. Just a few thoughts to make you think a lot. Some people, of course, love to be seen in a Rolls Royce. It indicates value and worth to them, and they're very proud in having accumulated wealth. I'm not suggesting they shouldn't be. We may have feelings of success and possibly of superiority. This is all about money, really, isn't it? One young graduate's reappraisal of values and life's purpose, where money, in her view, changed as something that was great to have to something that was needed to do something of great value. This is a friend of mine, Georgina Hemingway. She had a very comfortable life in Parliament. She was very well paid, but she learned about terrible things that had been happening in Cambodia, and she went there and she formed a charity, having completed a one-year diploma in entrepreneurship at the Judge Business School in Cambridge. And she founded a company which now runs cafes, the Footprint Cafes. She raised 200,000 to start those cafes, and she collects books worldwide which are distributed through the cafes. And remember, Cambodia had a terrible period when many people were slaughtered there, and it's still a very poor country. And she's also helping Cambodian startups by bringing entrepreneurial education. Money was essential for the vision to become reality, but she thought differently about it as she went to Cambodia. And here's a heroine, Mother Teresa. Money didn't stop her efforts. She gave her life to help the poor and sick in India. And I just asked the question for you to think about, not to give me an answer. How do we measure the value of such dedication? We'll come back and have a look at some of the things that are happening to help the poorer peoples of the world, but it is time to look at a little bit of history and a story or two. So here on this chart, we can see the evolution of money. In the early days of civilization, people didn't have money, but they swapped things, bartering. They changed one thing for another. And then gold was discovered and became very valuable. And you can see how the whole situation developed through coins, paper money, cards, electronic money, cryptocurrency. We'll talk a little bit about that. Remember that for any of these systems to work for everyone, trust is a key word. We can look at it a little bit differently here because there's something we didn't mention when we looked at that last slide, which I call M money, unseen mobile device money. Comes from your watch or your mobile phone. Is it money or is it just value? We can think about that later on. Just to emphasize the importance of gold and the gold standards, we haven't given it up. It is still a reserve currency, and other precious metals too, diamonds and so on, retain their intrinsic value. And we'll come back to money specifically, but where do banks come in? When you think of money, you must think of banks, and here's a little history for you. This is a gold model from China. It's a 2001 model commemorating the ancient walled city of Pingyao in Shaanxi province, central China. I've had the great privilege to visit there, and it has a lot to tell us about the history of banks. It's a time warp when you go there. It's a walled city. It's great for tourists, but the high-speed train is now getting there regularly from Beijing, and it will change dramatically. When I was there, the local band were playing, and you can see that it's really off the beaten track. It's an amazing place if you ever get a chance to go there. It hasn't changed much in centuries, and it was a prosperous trading center in the 17th century, where one of the very first unincorporated banks in China was formed. And you can see the bank there today, the Rishinchang Bank, the ancient bank of Pingyao. And they introduced paper money to replace heavy silver. Heavy silver was the currency that they were using before they had paper money, but heavy silver is hard to transport around a big country like China, and there were lots of bandits, so they had to hire lots of armed guards to get the silver safely from place to place. And they developed nationally, this bank, and internationally. They had eventually 33 branches by the time they closed in 1913, and they were in Russia and other parts of the world. It's a museum now, the bank. You can go inside and you will see that it doesn't look that much different than our traditional branch banks looked before ATM machines, and a lot of banking practices were developed in those earlier days. And here is one of the earlier banknotes. This is not the very earliest. The earliest banknotes we know about, we found, were printed in the 7th century in China. This is a bit later on, the Qing Dynasty banknote. 100 taels of silver was the value of this banknote. Rather lovely, isn't it? The first banknotes in Europe, we think, were in Sweden in the 17th century, and of course coins came much earlier, 500 years before Christ was born, and that was in Greece. Now I'm taking us now up to northeast China, if you know any Chinese geography, to Shenyang in Liaoning province in 1930. And this is a private bank that was founded in those days by Marshal Zhang, one of the warlords, and it's now a wonderful financial museum, a museum of the financial world, where you can go and see lots and lots of exhibits. And this is the original banking hall, open to visitors, and I met some interesting characters there, as you can see. And it has the world's biggest collection of banknotes, corridors and corridors of exhibits and pictures of these wonderful works of art, because I think a banknote in many ways is a creative work of art. So the banks were founded and they sprung up all over the world. And let's leap to the present and ask the question, what are they up to these days? Are they very helpful for small companies? I don't find them so. They've had a tough time, haven't they? Debts, booms and busts, focused on generating their own trading profits. And in 2008, a big financial collapse, and they had to be bailed out. And you read about and you know about property bubbles, mortgage problems, greed and fear come into this, don't they? Two very strong words. Human emotions drive people sometimes to think in a particular way about money. And we might ask, what and who are the banks for? Initially, they were focused on customers, but they have changed. They're changing again, as we will see. I'd like us to think for a little while about banks and how they market themselves. And one marketing approach that I've got an example of here is a very interesting one. Most of you won't recognize this as a credit card. The National Westminster Bank in 1972 launched this new card because Barclaycard were doing a lot of credit card business and they wanted to compete with it. I wonder what you think of the message they used to persuade people to get this card and to use it to acquire things and pay interest. They said, this card takes the waiting out of wanting. Wow, what a marketing message. You can get what you want today without paying for it. What about the ethics and morals of that? Have a think about it. Now I've got a question for you. What happened in 1991 that changed not only banking and the financial systems of the world, lots of issues related to money, but it changed the world at large? Here's a clue. Here's another clue. Tim Berners-Lee, 1991. You must have guessed if you didn't know. The World Wide Web, the internet, changing the world in finance and giving birth to a new industry, fintech. Revolution. Online finance, mobile payments, big data, cognitive computing, alternative finance, money online, crowdfunding. We can have a donation crowdfunding, reward crowdfunding, advanced risk management, and then blockchain. Part of the history of money, big time, the internet. Cognitive computing, big data, mobile payments, digital currencies. Fintech, many, many new fintech companies have sprung up and benefited from this revolution. And all of this has led to an acceleration towards a cashless society. And social media leadership has actually put China in the front position. China is close, and parts of China are there. It's close to being a cashless society. And we have to ask the question, is there a future for credit cards? So what we can say is the world of developing finance, alternative finance, finance online has come about because of the internet. More power to the people. The impact of innovation, entrepreneurship, new ways of communicating. The banking systems were failing anyway, and we can now go online and raise money, either loan money, venture capital, all sorts of money, without banks. We can't all do it. It doesn't work every time, but it's growing and it's there. So the equation at the bottom says to us that the internet plus entrepreneurs brought revolution in finance. And here's one of the men that made it happen faster, because entrepreneurs changed the world. And this is Jack Ma. And you know he's Chinese, and you know he started up Alibaba. And he said, if the banks don't change, we will change them. And indeed, he changed them. He founded My Bank, and his microloan business has loaned money to 500,000 small businesses at least so far. And of course, he founded Alipay, and that leads the mobile payments revolution. So we are still living through a revolution. I just want to show you how fast alternative finance, online finance, has grown in China. There it is, year by year, up to 2017. It's much bigger now, but by 2017, it had reached almost 400 billion US dollars, money online. And then came blockchain. I'm not going to talk a great deal of technology about blockchain. It is a system of recording information in ledgers. It's a digital ledger. It does make it very difficult to change, hack, cheat the system. And there are a network of computer systems that is on the blockchain. It's still subject to a lot of research and publications. And I believe that it will find use in many, many spheres, not just in finance, in computer science, even in healthcare. The blockchain is a revolutionary technology. And if you want to read a lot about blockchain, the Center for Alternative Finance at the Judge Business School have published some very good blockchain benchmarking reports, which you can just go online and you can get them. And talking about blockchain brings us to Bitcoin and cryptocurrencies, which are based on blockchain technology. But before we discuss Bitcoin, let's define currency. What are the defined characteristics of a currency? What's a currency for? The classical definition, it's a store of value, it's a unit of account, it's a medium of exchange. And we have relative currencies, don't we? We have pounds and dollars and euros. And that has great implications for international trade, because as the values of currencies change, strange things can happen to the accounts of companies. And of course, in the world, and you'll hear a lot more about this in another lecture later on in the program, inflation, hyperinflation, disinflation is all measured in terms of currency changes. And you're going to talk about that later on. So my question, you can think about it, is Bitcoin a true currency? And are other cryptocurrencies true currencies? The Bitcoin is much in the news today. Do these cryptocurrencies meet the criteria of a true currency? Or are they more a device to make a profit, buying and selling? Are they a store of value, a unit of account, a medium of exchange? My own opinion is that they are trading devices to make profit for people that trade in them. They're designed to make big profits. Unfortunately, today for some people, they're making big losses. And then when we think about money, what about the value of companies? Money in equity ownership and stock exchanges, where many investors place their money. Valuing companies, when we come to value them, is a very risky and difficult business. And here's just a couple of examples of why, when we have booms and busts and greed and fear and things going out of control, we see amazing shifts in company valuations. There's Bookham. When it went public in April 2000, it was valued at 1.2 billion. A year later, down to 230 million. Same company, same management, same market, same product. Overvalued, overvalued, due largely to greed, I suggest. Look at the bottom one, just 2 clicks. Went out of business rather quickly. Its value disappeared and dissipated because it wasn't really real. Financial thinking went out of the window during that period of the booms in technology stocks. Panic and paranoia led to disasters for some people. Before we leave the subject of digital technology, I want to go back to what we were speaking of earlier, the poor people of the world, and I want to show you this picture of a very great man, Muhammad Yunus. He won the Nobel Prize because he had vision, and he was a Bangladeshi. And he said, we really need to think about the poorest people in the world and enable them to get money, to get credit. And he is the father of microfinance, and he founded the Grameen Bank, lending to the poor online. And they do pay back. People told him at the beginning, they'll never pay you back, but they do. Certainly 93, 94% of all the loans get repaid. And there are now, as you see, more than 100 schemes, schemes in more than 100 countries and more than 10 million loans. And another Bangladeshi then came on the scene. This is another great man, Iqbal Kadir. He's now in the USA. And he said, my people in Bangladesh are not empowered. The government is corrupt. The people don't have any way of communicating. And when he said that, there were very few mobile telephones in Bangladesh. And he said, I'm going to take some money from the Grameen Bank and I'm going to start the Grameen Phone Company and I'm going to enable ladies in villages in Bangladesh to buy a low-cost mobile telephone. And they will buy the phone and they'll be able to rent it out to other ladies who will give them money, and eventually they will have enough money to buy a goat and maybe 2 goats. And he said to the West, don't give my government money, aid, help the people to help themselves. If you find a starving man and give him a fish he can live for a day, teach him how to fish and he might live a lot longer. Now, are there strong connections between art and money? You're going to hear a lot more about this in the festival, so I'm not going to dwell on it today. But just think about things like sponsorship, art education and what it costs, scholarships, art galleries, entertainment, design, architecture, literature, games, all that stuff. There's a lot of money relationships involved, aren't there? And right at the beginning, we might think banknotes have an artistic beauty of their own, beyond monetary value. I showed you a picture earlier from the museum in Shenyang, just to illustrate that there's lots and lots of creativity in money itself in terms of art and color. Value and wealth, remember, also relate, don't they, to owning great paintings, even when the artist is long dead. Here's a very famous painting, the Mona Lisa. It's now priceless. It's beyond valuation. And the world's fine art markets are on a level with stock exchanges. They're exchanging money all the time because great wealth is required to own great paintings. This is a very interesting lady. I studied her work. She was an artist in Mexico. That was when she lived. And it's a reminder when we think of someone like Frida Kahlo that science and business are not everything. Her art brought financial improvement to poor communities in Mexico. And her art is now very highly valued. It's just one example. She got sponsorship. Money was used to support art. And that was something very important. This lady had a very hard life. She was very badly treated by disease as a child. She had polio. She had a big traffic accident. She was always in pain. But she struggled on and she made herself into a great artist. She married another one, Diego Rivera, who didn't always treat her very well, by the way. But that's just another example of how art and money are related. And there are lots of examples now of money art. You're going to hear about it later on. Mark Wagner and others create new images from money forms. It's interesting. And Banksy does artworks related to money. This is an example. He's showing us here child slave labor. So there's a political message involved as well. And some money artists take liberties with the currency. Look at the pictures on those banknotes. And these are now priceless collector's items. And here in Cambridge, where I'm sitting, art is a very important part of life, and it is related to prosperity and money. The School of Art, which is part of Anglia Ruskin University, has a great history from the 19th century, and there are lots of societies and painters generating wealth through their art creation today. And also here in Cambridge, we have the games industry. We have Jagex, we have Frontier. We have a lot of Chinese money coming in to these games companies. RuneScape of Jagex is one of the longest surviving computer games in the world. And Frontier Technology have attracted a big investment from Tencent of China. And those of you connected with Anglia Ruskin should be very proud that the university has an international digital games incubator, the Reactor, which has great expertise. And that needed money. It was funded by investors. And of course, the School of Art is still thriving here. So the computer games industry brings creativity, art, design, money, and technology together, and it's valued at multi-billions. It's a wonderful example of combining technology, art, and money. Here's another great man. He was a great designer and architect, some of you will have heard of. And just reflect on those words for a moment. Building art is a synthesis of life in materialized form. We should try to bring in under the same hat, not a splintered way of thinking, but all in harmony together. Art, life, and money. Creative thoughts. He had a very creative life. He believed in the value of aesthetics, and his designs were brilliant. And he made us think about the value of life balance too. Work and play. He used to say man is the eternal child. Creativity, money, and life should be in perspective. And here, I love to show this picture. It's one of Alvar Aalto's great designs. It brought great human satisfaction, and he generated a great deal of wealth in a variety of forms. It included financial wealth, and he brought much value to his country, Finland. And then here in Cambridge, another company, which is a rather unusual company, combining something nice to eat and lots of design work and wonderful artistic images in that picture. And Hotel Chocolat was born in Cambridge. And think about the use of money on a company like this. They have a cocoa plantation. They have stores and cafes. And they bring food, art, design, creative things together, creating jobs and wealth. Couldn't have done it without money. So I'm coming to a few conclusions. I've rattled through some stories for you, which I hope you have found interesting, and I hope they've given you some rather different perspectives on money. I haven't used too many numbers, and I haven't used too many charts, because I think wealth and money are much bigger, broader issues than just numbers. But let's just take a peep ahead and think about the future of finance and money. We will have a cashless society. We will see the end of credit cards. We are in the age of fintech and big data. We live in a world where there are geopolitical uncertainties. The progressive elimination of poverty is surely something that we all believe should be very important. Perhaps we should be redefining true value. Technology is moving upwards and onwards. It does so many, many new things for us, and it helps us think differently about value and assets. But we can't, I'm afraid, expect human nature to change dramatically, and greed and fear will remain factors that influence what people think about and what they do with money. So my advice to you is, for the future, relative to money and life in general, expect the unexpected. Reimagination is a wonderful thing, and it is likely to create a lot of surprises, and digital technology in particular, and we've got quantum computing coming along too, will create a whole new world in which art, money, creativity, and entrepreneurship will change the world even faster. That is what I believe very, very firmly, and I'm so happy to be part of it all. There's some books that you can read about at least how to raise money and the value of it when you're starting a business. We've got it in Mandarin as well as in English, and I hope that some of you, by the end of the whole program here, will be able to receive copies of this book, because there may be some available if you enter certain competitions. And I thank you so much for listening. I'm leaving you with a little artwork somebody did of me. It was a student that did this drawing of me. And it's been such a great delight for me to be with you today. And I'm now here to answer any questions you might have and to talk a little bit longer. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Barrell, for that thought-provoking and brilliant presentation. It was really good. I really enjoyed it personally. We'll now open the call to a Q&A. If you have a question, please raise your virtual hand, which will be on the top right-hand side of your screen on MS Teams. And I will try my best to select some of you. Upon selection, I'll try and read out your name. Could you please unmute yourself and also show your video and ask your question? And then after having asked the question, please remute yourself so we don't have any audio issues. I'm going to go first with Ricardo Silva. If you'd like to unmute yourself.
Hi, good morning. Sorry,
Hi,
my video is
Ricardo.
not working at the moment. First of all, thank you so much, Professor Allen, for your presentation. It was really a pleasure for me to hear you and to learn with you. And then my question is, what is your opinion on our current system of wealth creation and, let's say, hoarding? And do you think it is a fair system and that people are going to allow this situation to continue in the future? Where
Sorry,
so many of...
Tell me the question. Can you just repeat the first part of the question for me?
So what is your opinion on our current system of wealth creation and hoarding, where we see people with so many billions and trillions? And do you think this current situation is fair? And are the people gonna allow it to continue in the future?
Do you mean the actual hoarding of physical money, that or the acquisition of wealth?
The acquisition of wealth.
The acquisition of wealth. It's very difficult.
Billionaires.
In other words, the acquisition of value, not just physical money, however they have it. It might be in assets and so on. Well, this is one of the big questions, isn't it, for all time? It's the issue of the kind of controls that you can apply fairly in any economy and the kind of restraints that you might apply. And it's not so easy to know how to control it. I think what we've seen recently in China is rather interesting, where Mr. Jack Ma became one of the richest men in the world. I think the value of his fortune rose to something well over 70 billion US, maybe more than that. And he became very strong in his mind and said bad things about the banks. He said they were like pawn shops. And he has suddenly become subject in his country to government controls, and they're stopping him take Alipay public. And also, it is said that he hasn't been seen much lately. So I think depending on where you are in the world, the likelihood of control of people gaining more and more wealth is likely to depend on the political situation under which you live. I mean, there's more than one issue here, there's also the other issue of mismanagement of economies and what that does to hyperinflation, which you're going to hear later on. But the acquisition of wealth and the power of people that acquire this wealth, if we look at what's happened in America recently, where Twitter have banned the president, and I think they did the right thing, but there is a company which is worth many billions. And it is a worry that people with many, many billions can control too many aspects of our lives. And the other thing, of course, that worries people a lot is how once these companies become so big, they can acquire smaller, fast-growing companies at an early stage and become monopolies. And I think it is extremely difficult. And I don't think it's just a question of controlling and regulating the size of their wealth, but it's regulating what they actually do and how they control the world of communication. To me, that in a way is a bigger worry than just the financial stuff. I heard a lecture in Cambridge last year by the professor of politics in Cambridge, and he said that he thought that Mark Zuckerberg was more dangerous than President Trump. So it's a difficult situation. You're right to worry about it. And I'm not sure whether I know of any country in the world where it is particularly well controlled, although perhaps in Northern Europe we have seen better approaches to creating an equitable society. But I don't have an answer to it, and I worry about it.
Thank you so much for your answer.
Thank you very much. That was a brilliant question. Up next, I am going to go to James Farrer. If you could please unmute yourself.
Hello there, Professor Barrell. I have a question, and it's what effect will a cashless society have on possible hyperinflation?
That's a very good question, and the only answer today is we're not really sure, are we? It hasn't had that much effect and impact on the inflation situation in China as I see it today. I don't know whether it will have a huge impact. I think other factors will militate more in terms of hyperinflation, such as the way the economy is run. And in some countries in the world, the economies are being run so recklessly that the value of money relative to other currencies is disappearing and dissipating all the time. So I don't see why it should make a major difference if we assume that economies will still go on being managed in a sensible way. And I'm not an expert on economics, but I think when we look at the Chinese economy and the way that it's being controlled and the controlling nature of the government in China, I don't say that critically, I said it factually, because they do control, they control the banks to begin with. And their approach to economic development and globalization, I don't think it will have that kind of impact in China. What might happen elsewhere, where there might be more criminality and more of a black market on money and value, I'm not sure what will happen there.
Thank you very much for your answer.
Thank you, James. Up next, we'll go to Anamar.
You need to unmute.
Hi, sorry, my microphone was muted. So my question is, what are the advantages and disadvantages of a world single currency, in your opinion?
Sorry, can you say it a little bit more slowly? So I can't see you, so I can only hear you.
So what are the advantages and disadvantages of a world single currency, in your opinion?
That's a very, very good and deep question. It's a wonderful question, really, that you could write a book about, couldn't you? I think that the advantages of a single currency are manifest most of all where you have a truly single political system. So although there are divisions in America, they do have the dollar as the currency that is the currency of all America, and the states are part of a federation. So they have been able to create a much more holistic identity for the dollar. And all over America, in the States, we don't see great disparity, not great disparity, there are differences, but not great disparity between the economic performance of the states. Whereas in Europe, 27 states now, isn't it? It was 28, I think. Anyway, in 27 different states, there are 27 different economies. And I think that's one of the major problems. And look what we saw happening in Greece over the years, where the economy was floundering badly. And in the days before a single currency, they would have devalued their local currency, but they couldn't do that. They were part of the euro. And in that case, I think the euro didn't do much of a service to the Greek economy. So if you don't have political and federal unity, and you have different economies trying to work with one currency, and some economies are going up and some are going down, some of the smaller countries in Europe have benefited from the euro. I think Finland, for example, would be an example where having the euro, because their economy was quite stable and they were reasonably productive, was very good for the country. But I think the biggest difference, and it's the biggest advantage and the biggest disadvantage, relates to the difference between a union like the EU and a truly consolidated state like the US or China, where there is a single currency and a single political system.
All right, thank you very much.
Does anybody else have any further questions for Professor Allen? Can we go to Ruth?
Hi, thank you for your presentation. Just wondering, what do you think the negative impacts could be of sort of traditional financial systems declining if things like cryptocurrency developed more?
Sorry, could you say it again? My sound is not that good here.
Sorry. So what do you think the negative impacts on traditional financial systems could be in the future with the development of cryptocurrencies?
Ah, okay. Well, a few years ago, there was a lot more hype about the Bitcoin. And there was obvious value to be anticipated in what we know about the blockchain, if it really did enable effectively the elimination of the need for trust, is what they were talking about. The word was that, you know, it can't go wrong. You don't need trust. Is a basis of all financial transactions, small and large, or has been since time began. But it was said that the cryptocurrencies would not make that necessary, that nothing could go wrong. But my concern with Bitcoin in particular, as I said earlier, is that it isn't really a true currency. It doesn't have those three characteristics that make a currency a stabilizing factor. It's a trading device, and primarily the people that are in it to make money and make a profit and get out again. Now, I don't think that it will have a major impact on the financial situations of the world in general, because this is only my opinion, and of course you can always have a wrong opinion. I don't think cryptocurrencies will go as far as people have predicted. They certainly haven't gone as far as people have predicted so far. They're still a very minor part of all the financial transactions in the world. So I think they probably will remain, and they may grow, a trading device for people to buy and sell and make or lose money, and they will be part of the scene. And I don't think the cashless society and where we're moving generally will have too much impact on all of that, because there are other ways of controlling online payments and the payments that we may see happen in the future, other than with things like the Bitcoin. I mean, also you remember Facebook, or Mark Zuckerberg tried to introduce an online currency which didn't catch on at all with the larger financial institutions in the world. So I don't think it's going to be a major problem. That's just my view.
Thank you so much for your answer.
Now, if we could go to Carlos.
Hello. Can you
Yeah.
hear me? Can you hear me well?
I can hear you, yes.
Great. First of all, I would like to really thank you for your presentation, Mr. Alan Barrell. It was really, the delivery was amazing. The topics covered were really interesting, and the huge effort, you can just see it by the quality and how nice the presentation has been. So I just have a quick question about the constraints and restrictions of freedom of movement, of physical movement of people. How does that affect to the cash flow for local communities? How does that has an impact for some countries that maybe doesn't have access to virtual currencies? How deep could be the impact for, let's say, people who cannot travel out of their areas and they do have trade deals and they rely still on traditional and maybe more archaic systems, and how this can be maybe protected or enabled by public-private partnerships, and maybe they can help maybe local traders against big corporations to try to do their job a little bit.
No, I think
survive.
It's a very good question, and my own opinion, I state right at the outset that I am a world thinker. One of the mantras that I offer to my students and anyone that speak to me anytime is, why don't we create, if we can, as close to at least a world without borders that can be created? Because in everything I've seen in my life, the more people are enabled, legally and properly, to move around and to integrate with each other, the better economies grow. Just a little example, in not just money, Cambridge, when I came here 50 years ago, the ethnic minority population was really quite small, probably about 5%. Now it's over 20%. And the diversity of culture and the diversity of ethnicity and the diversity of knowledge has brought great value and tremendous innovation. I haven't spoken in the usual way today because I'm talking about money, that I do speak about innovation. So I think that the restriction of the movement of people is a restriction on the possibilities of innovation generally. In financial terms, without any doubt, the restriction of movement, and we see it already happening since we in UK left the European Union, much to my regret, at the end of last year, we already see restriction of goods. Things are happening to stop the fishermen of Scotland getting their product into Europe before it rots away. The shelves in Northern Ireland of supermarkets are emptying because product cannot be delivered. And also, I think that the movement of people also enables the transfer of wealth. A lot of the people that come to this country or came to this country from the very poor parts of the European Union actually sacrificed their own lives by working to make money to send back home, to create prosperity and make their own country better. So I do believe that the restriction of movement is generally a bad thing for innovation. I think it's a bad thing for the way people think about each other, and I'm sure that it is a bad thing for the transfer and accumulation of wealth and also of trade. And I think you're right that there are companies, and smaller ones will be the ones that suffer a lot, that will not be able to trade in the way that they could trade if there are more restrictions on travel. And I'm not suggesting that we shouldn't restrict travel when we have a pandemic. I'm talking much more generally, and I know your question is a general question. It's not to do with the coronavirus. It's to do with the general philosophy in my country, the general philosophy in Trump's America, that movement and immigration are bad things. The whole history of the world tells me something entirely different, frankly. So I'm very much one for moving and mixing.
Thank you so much for your very detailed question. Again, and for sharing your knowledge and your wisdom. I very much share your opinion and your vision on every topic you discussed. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello there. I think we've got time for maybe one or two more questions. So I'm going to go next to Carol, who posted a question in the chat. If you could unmute yourself.
Hi, my question is more around the psychology of money, because I'm an entrepreneur, so I'm a life and career coach. So basically, I have to sell myself, and there's a lot of stigma around there. Like when you help people, you shouldn't charge for your services. My son is an artist and he's finding a lot of psychological, it's damaging his mental health actually to think he has to make money through his art. So I don't know, there's a lot of stigma around money. So I wanted to hear your point of view.
Yes, I think it's a very interesting area, and you won't know this, but interestingly enough, my wife is an artist, and she ran for 22 years a private art gallery promoting the work of the artists of this region, not the big artists, but the smaller artists. And so I'm very close to the world of art, and it is a struggle for artists, and it is a struggle for entrepreneurs also. One of the reasons we wrote the book, Show Me the Money, was to help entrepreneurs to gain confidence. And one of the reasons we run our workshops on finance and how to get it is to help people have the confidence not to feel negative about wanting money. There's nothing negative about being a salesman, although in some parts of the world, salesmen are still regarded as purveyors of untruths, which is not at all the case, because I know I have been one. And so for entrepreneurs, things I think may be much harder for young artists who are also entrepreneurs. If they're going to start an art business, they are an entrepreneur. Entrepreneurs in the technology and science field who found companies that make things at least have a pathway towards fundraising. Fundraising for artists and making money from art is much more difficult. And I think that all we can do is encourage them. Encouragement is as important at certain times as the money itself. And I'm encouraged by the establishment of more and more innovation centers. There's one in Cambridge called the Future Business Center, and there are arts innovation centers, which enable spaces where people can work together, share resources, share their knowledge, and bring themselves collectively to a higher level of confidence. So it's a difficult area and it's a struggle. But I think the environment is getting better. It's getting more positive, and there are more helpers and mentors around. And having a good mentor can be very helpful for somebody like did you say your son or whoever is looking to really build a case to get money. Having an experienced mentor can be very helpful. And Anglia Ruskin has actually got a mentor scheme. I'm working with a young lady, she may even be online, who is starting a company as she completes her film and video degree at ARU, and she wants to start a company. And but having a mentor can be helpful.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We're going to have to wrap up the call now. I can see that Ricardo Silva, you still have a question. If you'd like to send that question through to our email that we contacted you on, then we can send it on to Professor Barrell, and he will get in contact with a response, and then we can send that through to you.
You don't do it. Okay,
Uh,
thank you.
Is that all right? Brilliant. Well, thank you all for attending the Money Festival webinar. We hope you enjoyed the event. And again, a massive thank you to Professor Barrell for educating us on money. The next event webinar we will be having will be next week at the same time on Monday the 25th at 10 a.m. Please ensure you obtain a ticket via the Student Union website, and the event call link will be sent in due course.
And can I just add one thing?
Yeah.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you for your wonderful questions. I'm very impressed indeed by the questions. I'm impressed by the organization too. So thank you, organizers. And don't hesitate to send in your questions. And by the way, I've told the organizers they can make my slides available to anyone that wants to have them.
Brilliant. Thank you. We will also have directions on how to obtain tickets for the next event on our social media, on Instagram and Facebook at Money Festival 2020, as well as the steps to sign up as a student or non-student. If you found it difficult, always get in contact with us via the social media. We can help alleviate that problem for you. And we also have an exciting competition, which will be coming in due course, in which you can participate in. And we have 5 £50 worth gift vouchers to give away, and 5 books written by Professor Barrell himself. He's kindly donated. The competition will consist of you creating your own money art and expressing your perception and relationship with money. Further details of how you can win and have your voice heard will be found on our Instagram and Facebook at Money Festival 2020. This will be released shortly. And finally, please check your emails for our post-event survey so you can have your say on the event, what you think we could do better for next week, or any issues you had. Thank you again, and we will see you next week.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.